Excellent. Excellent. Well, thanks for joining me today on the Secrets of Success podcast with Dr. Shane Needham. We're going to talk about some really great things today. Let me get some introductions out of the way. So, thanks again for joining us on the Secrets of Success podcast with Dr. Shane Needham, where you can find previous podcasts on SoundCloud, on iTunes, on Spotify, and also on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and also YouTube channel. And you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook, where we're streaming live right now. And we can take your questions online. You can comment online on the live stream. You can find me on Facebook at Shane Needham. You can also find me on Instagram and LinkedIn. So thank you, viewers. Thank you, listeners. We've had a great success for 2020 when we launched. We've been doing this for almost a year now, or about a year, and it's just been a wonderful success. And I have learned so much, networked with so many people, and I hope you have learned a lot too. So what is our theme? Our theme is never be outworked. What do we talk about? And we talk about never being outworked, and sometimes that's never giving up. And we talk about all things from me being an entrepreneur, a business owner, a scientist, but also in my spare time as an amateur bodybuilder, powerlifter, coach, all those things that being an entrepreneur has allowed me to be. And of course, my most important job is being a disciple and also a father of 4 wonderful children. So thanks again for joining us, Pete. And without further ado, please introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself. And we talk a lot about careers here. We talk a lot about business, and we'll focus a little bit on that today. But I don't ever want anybody to paint themselves with one brush, because we're always more than what our job title is. And job titles go away. We're replaced by somebody else. And it's what kind of an impact do we want to leave in this world? So talk about everything and start wherever you want, Pete.
Okay. Thanks, Shane. So, Pete Tortorelli, I am the managing director now of Omni International. We had a title change. We were recently acquired about 3 months ago by PerkinElmer. So,
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you very much. Great organization. Still trying to network my way through. A little bit of a difference between being a 50-person company and a 13,000-person company. So I've been in the business, life science business, here with Omni and with other companies since the the early 1990s.
Wow.
So going on 25 to 30 years.
Wow.
And just blessed to be part of a great society of scientists and salespeople and just really good people. And I've been very fortunate in my life.
That's amazing. So let's go back a little bit. So where did you go to school? Where did you get your educational training?
Actually, I grew up in the Northeast. I went to an engineering college that is actually now defunct, which is
What was it
which is
called?
always good. It was called Waterbury State Technical College.
So was that
And
in Waterbury, Connecticut?
It's in Connecticut. It's
Okay.
actually now part of the University of Connecticut system.
Okay.
So kind of by proxy, I went to UConn before they. That's what I tell people, because everybody knows who UConn is,
Right.
but no one knows what Waterbury State is. So went to school there, got a degree in computer science. Never worked a day in my life in computers. Just hated it. Actually, couldn't stand programming.
Interesting.
But I got a scholarship. I got a free ride through school. It was either computer science or electrical or mechanical or chemical engineering, and all the girls were in computer science, so that's what I took.
Well, if that worked
Yeah.
out for you, that's great. So were you born and raised in Connecticut then?
Born and raised in Connecticut until I was 25 years old.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. Well, so what part of Connecticut?
Right on the town line of Waterbury and Woolkit, which is almost smack dab in the center of the state.
Okay.
Where
So is that south of Hartford then?
It is southwest of Hartford.
Okay. Got it.
So halfway between Hartford and New Haven.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. Perfect. So when I worked for Pfizer in Groton, Connecticut, I knew a little bit about, I didn't really go that way much. A few times I flew out of Hartford, but then we
Right.
started flying out of Rhode Island, or out of Providence. But anyway, a great state, but I had no idea you're actually from the Northeast. I have a funny story. So when I first moved there in 1993 for my first career position at Pfizer as a scientist, and I hear on the radio, this is, of course, pre-internet, pre-social media, and you'd always hear about this place, Yukon. This makes me sound so ignorant, but this is what I didn't know about the Northeast. I thought it was like spelled Yukon. I thought it was like Yukon territories from Canada or something. I had no clue. It took me like a year. It's like Yukon. Oh, University of Connecticut.
Mhm.
But anyway, so how did we meet, Pete? You
I don't
remember?
know. I think it was at a trade show. It might have
I
been
think so too.
AOAC, or
Was it
maybe
AAPS?
it could have been an AAPS show. You had a
Yeah,
booth, and
yeah.
I had a booth. I think almost like directly across.
Oh,
And
yeah, I think so.
and anytime you, for your listeners, anytime you attend a trade show, you get really busy for about maybe 2 hours of the day, and 6 hours of the day, you could pretty much kick a soccer ball and not hit anybody in the conference hall.
Right,
So I'm
right.
sure we started a conversation.
Yeah.
Um, and then your business bought some equipment from us, and we just kind of communicated over the past, I don't know, 15, 20 years. So
Yeah.
we've known each other a long time.
I know it has been. I mean, we definitely don't see each other a lot, especially because of COVID now. But
Right.
I remember a book that we were talking. This was when, I guess, yeah, it was probably 15 or 18 years ago when we met. I don't know exactly the date either. I mean, and as well as I do, when you're traveling to trade shows, you don't even remember where they were at. People are like, well, you don't
Right.
remember when you went to Houston? No, I don't actually.
Right.
Houston looks the same as um, Lincoln City. It looks as Lincoln, Nebraska. When you're in a trade show, you get in
Yeah.
you fly into an airport, you get into a cab, you go to the trade show, and then you go back
Mhm.
to your hotel room and have some dinners with clients and so on and so forth. But you gave me, it was when, and it's still obviously a growing economic trend, but it was when offshoring was becoming really big, offshoring to Asia. And you gave me a book. Do you remember the book?
I do. It was called Poorly Made in China.
Actually, maybe I thought it was called the China Price.
Could have been. I don't know. I gave you a book. I remember
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
I
and it
don't
was.
remember the title.
I love
Um,
the book,
yeah.
and it was the stories. Oh my goodness, and it was just about the quality of things and the things that were done that were just culturally accepted there.
Right.
That really, if people knew how their products were manufactured and then sent to the States, they would probably never buy them. I mean,
Yeah.
just
I will say that manufacturing over the past 5 to 10 years offshore has dramatically improved.
I'm sure it had
And
to.
I know with the company that I'm with now, they actually, I believe, employ more people in China than they do the United States.
Wow. Yeah,
So
it
things
had.
have changed quite a bit.
I'm glad. I'm glad 'cause that's better for
Mhm.
the consumer. That's
Absolutely.
and that's better for the market. And anything that's better for the consumer is better for the whole market. And so I think that's how we met at probably a trade show. I have no idea what the location was, but tell us a little bit about your role. So you were CEO at Omni International, and now you're managing director. So tell us about your business, your role there. What's challenging about it? What's the most rewarding part about it? Go.
Sure. So I started out here, really, I think, part time, putting parts together as a second job. And over time, that turned into a full time job. And it was more manufacturing related. So I ran the manufacturing end of the business, worked my way up, purchasing and inventory and manufacturing management, and then moved into sales, believe it or not.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Moved into sales, opened a sales office in Northern Virginia, lived there for a few years, and then moved to Atlanta with the
And now,
business.
so you started out in Connecticut? Is that where you started?
Yes. So the business had three owners at one
Okay.
point.
Okay.
Two of the owners took over and fired the third owner.
Yeah.
who went out and started a competing business, believe it or not.
Wow. Okay.
And so the two owners who were involved in the business in Connecticut both lived out of state. One lived in Delaware, one lived in Virginia. And so what happened was they decided they were going to move out of Connecticut because at the time it was not a very business friendly climate. And where do you go when you're looking to sell to scientists who are funded? But you go near NIH. So that's where we went. We went to Northern Virginia, opened up a sales office, was there for a couple of years. And then I moved to work for the other owner here in Atlanta in 1994 and 95.
And is that where the manufacturing was done or something?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
got it.
At the time, they were going to combine both sites here in the Atlanta area, and that didn't happen. And I actually quit Omni and was
Really?
gone for 5 years. Yes,
Oh, wow.
gone for 5 years. And when the two owners got back together after I had left and consolidated, meaning one owner bought out the other owner, the one remaining owner called me back and said, "Hey, I really would like to talk to you about coming back to work for me." And I bought out the other guy, and what do you say? And I told him, "No, I'm not interested. I don't want to come back." And it was funny because I talked to my wife at the time, and she said, "I really think you should talk to him." And so went back and had a series of conversations, and that was October of 2004. And here I am 16 and a half years later, still here.
Wow. And
So
what position did he bring you back as?
general manager. So and at that time we were very small, maybe 12 employees. And so I kind of did everything, ran sales, ran manufacturing.
Wow.
And then over the years, we slowly grew until about 5 years ago, where we had a really big growth spurt. We added a specific type of product here in the company, and then the company took off, grew to where we are now. And that owner decided last year he wanted to sell. And so during the Omni sales sweepstakes, the winner was PerkinElmer. And so
That's awesome.
yeah.
Well, they got it. They got a really good company with a good leader and a good team, and I think that's great. What would you say is the most challenging part of your position?
Wow. You and I were chatting a few minutes ago. I think it's trying to lead people when you don't have any experience leading in that time frame, if that makes sense. So for instance, what I'm thinking is COVID. And so, we went through a period where, we hit the rocks last year. It was bad for several months, and there's no handbook that you can read. There's nobody you can really talk to that basically says, "Hey, I've done this. I've been through a global pandemic, and I've seen my sales cut in half, and this is what you do." And yeah,
so tell us about that. What did you do? What was and what do you think was the key to the success?
So we had a lot of problems going into March of last year. Our sales were kind of stagnant. Sales globally were stagnant. And I did a lot of traveling January and February of last year, and asked a lot of people, including my competitors at trade shows, "Hey, what's your business like? What are things, looking like for you on the horizon?" And it looked like we were starting to slow down a little bit globally. And then when COVID hit, everything just stopped. So if you weren't selling PPE, or you weren't selling equipment that was specifically part of an RT-PCR test, then you weren't selling.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened to us. So nobody wanted a homogenizer, right? That's what we sell. So we had to make some hard choices. And
so describe to some of a lot of the viewers are not scientists. Describe what a homogenizer does, and describe how you guys pivoted, which I think is an awesome success story. So describe the before and the after COVID.
So in layman's terms, a homogenizer is basically a blender. So it'll take a solid sample and turn it into a liquid. And there are several different types of technology you can use to do that. There's blades, like a blender. There are ultrasonic disruption devices, which we also sell. And then there are bead beating, which is basically a projectile that you put in a tube, you shake it extremely fast, get a lot of energy, and that bead collides with the sample and pulverizes it.
So
So,
describe some of these samples, because this is my area of expertise.
mhm,
Well, that's why we've worked with Pete and Omni for years. Is we analyze therapeutics or drugs and metabolites. My company does in biological fluids and biological tissues, and so you sometimes have to grind these tissues up to see where this drug or where you have exposure to this therapeutic, and so all kinds of tissues. And the technology is actually amazing. I mean, it can grind and pulverize many things. And so, can you describe that in better detail, Pete?
sure. So we work with different types of tissues. So in ADME tox, drug development, anytime where you have a lot of different tissues that have to be um, ground down or reduced in particle size so that you can extract something from that sample. You're looking for an analyte, you're looking for a protein, you're looking for something. And that's what we do.
So
We
some of
also,
these tissues that are important, for example, depending on the type of therapeutic, it can be all over the body. It can
mhm,
be um, distributed all over the body. We're trying to use layman's terms here. And
right,
so obviously you're doing most of these experiments in rats and mice, for example, and you're looking at, does the drug go to the liver? Does it go to the kidneys? Does it go to the brain? Sometimes you want it in the brain. For certain, central nervous system drugs, you want them in the brain, right?
right.
And so those are the types of tissues that you might be dealing with, and all the way from skin, fingernails, hair, liver, kidneys, lung, brain. It goes on and on and on. And so designing devices to actually make sure you can get a homogeneous sample to where you turn it into a liquid, so it's not just one big piece of something, which is not good analytically. It's not precise and reproducible. And so they design awesome, incredible instruments. So that's the that's the before. COVID
Mhm.
hits, all of a sudden, uh-oh,
Yeah. So
we're just
COVID hits, and
yeah.
our business is just, it's in the crapper. I mean, our sales are down by 50%. Um, and we're 3 to 4 months into this. We have to do a staff reduction. We're looking at a second round of staff reductions, and we have an in-house lab. We're trying to figure out how we can be relevant in this test. And so what we came up with was, well, if you're doing a nasal pharyngeal swab and you're putting it in VTM, which is viral transport media, you have to go through this extraction process. What if we were to beat that swab and make it easier to release the RNA to get a test result? And so we did that, and we published on it, and we felt like, hey, we're going to save a lot of time. We're going to save people money by putting homogenizers in the front end. And so we released some papers. We did some articles. We called everybody we knew. Nothing. No response. No one was interested because we didn't have what's called an EUA at the time. So,
EUA, describe what that is to the listeners.
so during the pandemic, the FDA came up with, instead of a long, maybe multi-year approval process for a test or a diagnostic test, they came up with an emergency use authorization that they would give you, which was fast-tracked. And so we had applied for that, but because we didn't have a lab that worked with COVID positive samples, we had a problem getting that through. So basically, we were stuck, and now we're June, July timeframe. And to make a long story short, we had a customer at Georgia Tech, Georgia Institute of Technology, that had received a bunch of funding from the state of Georgia to come up with a test, an RT-PCR test, non-invasive, cheap, easy, effective, that could be deployed on campus. And they wanted to use saliva. So what they found was collecting saliva samples, excuse me, they found a lot of variation. Some of it wasn't even pipettable. You couldn't move it downstream with a liquid handler. So yeah, and they called us and said, would you mind giving us a demo of one of your machines? We think it might work for the front end. So our sales rep took one down there, and lo and behold, it worked. It worked fabulously.
So were they not pipe? So was this what did they use the swab, or was it still a pipette in a liquid, or what?
Well, no, see, they didn't want to use swabs, right? And so what the people at Georgia Tech and Georgia Emergency Management Association wanted to do was make an easy to administer test. And they felt like if you spit into a tube and collect that, we can get students to do that. You know, we don't want to take a student and have to shove something up their nose and be invasive. And they were right. This test came back with great results. And then they started to network throughout the state. So Georgia Tech shared their data with Augusta University, which used to be Medical College of Georgia. They did some papers on it, got published. They started testing students. Georgia Tech is testing students, University of Georgia, Georgia Southern, Georgia State.
Wow.
Basically every school in the university system of Georgia started doing this. And recently we started working with Emory. But unlike the rest of the schools that are doing a PCR test, Emory's doing an antigen test.
Oh, interesting.
With saliva. So yeah, so we went from basically trying to figure out how we were going to keep the doors open to tripling our sales, literally almost overnight. It was just amazing. It was feast or famine. That's great.
Wow, that is, I mean, stressful. I want to know the science a little bit here. Is the data showing that a saliva sample was actually not very homogeneous and it needed to be homogenized?
Well, the problem was they couldn't even test the saliva sample, right? So if you eat something in the morning, or you don't brush your teeth, or if you're sick, the viscosity of the saliva, it could have a lot of mucus, it could have a lot of food particles in it, makes it unworkable, untenable. And so they had to come up with a way to liquefy the saliva to make it work throughout the rest of the instrumentation. And that's what we do.
Wow, that is so cool. That is, and that, I mean, that led to your owner was in a position where he wanted to sell and monetize the business. And then that led to more interest in the business. I think that is a great story. And it led to an acquisition, correct?
Yeah, actually what happened was the gentleman at Augusta University, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Ravi Kohli, was doing a paper on the efficacy of saliva testing, has since done another paper on pooling, saliva pooling. And he also was working with PerkinElmer. So they had some of their instruments in the lab. And what he found was when he put our homogenizer on the front end of the PerkinElmer workflow, it worked way better than if they didn't have it. So this got back to PerkinElmer. And it just so happens that one of the general managers at PerkinElmer of the Applied Genomics Division is a guy by the name of James Atwood, who used to be a colleague. He used to work here at Omni. And so he got in touch with us and said, what are you guys doing, you know, in SARS-CoV-2 testing? You know, I heard that you guys are selling homogenizers. And we said, yeah. And so we got together, and this is in August of last year, and we actually made a product for PerkinElmer in about 6 weeks, fast-tracked it. That product got a CE IVD approval for the entire saliva SARS-CoV-2 testing workflow. And then from there, they purchased us. They acquired us. Wow. So the owner, you know, for political reasons, saw that, you know, if he was going to sell from a tax standpoint, it was probably beneficial to him to sell before the election cycle. Sure. And a new administration came in. So that was his opinion, and he wanted to get out before the end of the year, and he achieved his goal of selling the company. So we
Awesome.
actually, we sold the business actually in 6 weeks.
Wow. That is unheard of.
Which is another story altogether for a whole nother podcast. How do you sell a business in 6 weeks?
Wow.
Yeah.
Had you guys already pretty much done due diligence and you had audited financial statements and all that over the years, or was it a rush to do all that as well?
No, we didn't have any of that. So understand, Omni was a small business, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're under 50 employees,
Yeah.
single owner, no other shareholders. So most of what you need to market the business, we didn't have. We didn't have any of the financial data. We hadn't done due diligence. We hadn't put anything together. And so we started that process, I would say September of October of last year, and had 3 suitors, all in quick succession that we populated this for. And when PerkinElmer signed an LOI with us, we had a little over 6 weeks to make that deal happen, and we did it.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
So was that stressful, but rewarding at the same time?
Yeah. So you're basically working 2 full-time jobs, right? You're working a job to run the business, which still had to be run in an atmosphere where you're actually growing sales through your COVID channels, right? And by the way, other labs are starting to come back online. So your core business is picking up. And so you're doing 8 to 10 hours a day. And then another, 6 to 8 hours trying to populate all this data for attorneys and accountants and consultants and, potential buyers. So it was nerve-wracking, very nerve-wracking.
Wow.
We learned a lot.
Kudos to you. And so what does the future hold for you and the organization?
Great question. So we are now part of PerkinElmer, and we are part of the Applied Genomics division.
For those of you that aren't in science, they have an amazing reputation. Are they still a Connecticut-based company?
They are based in Hopkinton, Massachusetts. They have locations all over the world. So
Okay.
Hopkinton, Waltham, Mass. They have a facility in Shelton, Connecticut.
Okay.
They have facilities.
Where they were founded is in Connecticut?
I believe so. I believe they were.
Yeah.
And so, we have spent the past 3 months trying to onboard ourselves and with HR and PerkinElmer into the different systems and cultures that are part of a larger company. And it's been an education. The other thing is that, PerkinElmer bought 4 companies, I think 3 or 4 companies all at the same time. And so, so their people are, going nonstop trying to get everybody acclimated and onboarded. And so keeping our fingers crossed, we think we got it done.
Yeah.
Now that we're almost through Q1, and the future now is to start marketing our products through the different PerkinElmer channels.
That's awesome.
Which is exciting because we're meeting all new people, training new people, and
it opened up a whole new window for you guys, a whole bunch of opportunities.
Absolutely. 6 months ago, I couldn't even tell you what applied genomics was.
Yeah.
Now we're part of that division, but also selling through their other divisions: life science, food, agriculture, diagnostics, and coming up with different workflows that we didn't have access to before, and different collaboration partners.
Yeah, as a small business, you don't have that bandwidth, but all those industries that you just named, they all need homogenizers.
Absolutely. Every lab in the world, every R&D lab has to have a homogenizer.
They do.
So I'm like a kid in a candy store right now. I don't know where to go first, and it's having a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but man, I'll tell you what, it's very rewarding.
That's good. That's so good. That's so good to hear. Well, I've heard great things about you as a leader and as a going through tough times. I know that's the hardest part, but you can tell it's very rewarding to you, and you can see the passion of you just leading people. And so I think that's wonderful. So I know another thing that's big to you, your faith. And I only found this out a couple of months ago when we were talking about having you on my podcast and just kind of reconnecting, and just your faith is big to you. I didn't know that. I suspected it, to be honest with you. Usually you can kind of tell, but can you talk about how faith has played a role in your life? Even pre-career, but with your relationships, with everything you do and how it drives you?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. So I'm a Christian. I was born again in 1996, right before my first child was born, my daughter. And so it's been an amazing journey just to live out faith, because the thing that I found about Christianity was, it's a partnership. It's a partnership. You're never alone. And just when you find or think that you're at your worst or most alone is when you're most enveloped by the love of God, which to me is amazing.
Yeah. It's incomprehensible is what it is to me. I still can't, and I don't think I'm supposed to comprehend it. I don't think anybody really is, but it is. So did you grow up with faith at all, Pete?
My mom was a very committed Catholic. At about 16 or 17, I rebelled, and walked away from organized faith and religion, and marched to my own beat for about 15 years, did what I wanted. And when I met my wife and we got married, my wife actually got saved first. And, I went to church with her a couple of times, and I didn't trust the people. They looked too happy, And it was like, what? There's something wrong with you guys. You're too happy. This guy over here is telling me that, he's having family problems. This guy's, his life is in a mess. But why are you happy? Why do you look like things are going well for you? And at that point, I actually got into an honest study of faith, and what do I believe? I didn't know what I believed at that point. And I really researched it for about 6 months to a year and made a decision that, hey, this Jesus guy's for real and I'm going to follow him. And I haven't turned back, and I'm happy about that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how does that play a role in your primary relationships, your relationships with your children, and even your relationships at work? How does all that play a role?
So I'd like to say I'm perfect, but I'm not. So usually what it entails is getting up every morning and asking for forgiveness and asking for direction and wisdom. Knowing that if I've learned one thing in my life, Shane, that when I try to do things, I do them wrong. But when I do them with the grace of God and with wisdom that's given to me, then I usually do them okay. As long as you're humble and you get up every morning and ask for direction and ask for guidance, then things are okay. And I learned it's okay to screw up. I'm really hard on myself.
Sure.
I want to be a perfectionist, but I learned that when you screw up, you can always get back up and always be forgiven. Yeah. And that was the thing to me that set Christianity apart from everything else I ever knew in my life or ever studied, is that you don't have to be perfect. You can't be perfect. You can never be perfect enough to gain the love of God. It's a free gift.
That's right. Yeah, it's grace.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to give it to us, but he does. I like how you're talking about, and you're obviously in the position that you're in and the success that you've had through your life. You're definitely somebody that has to plan things. You have to plan what next year looks like, what 5 years away looks like. And that's not only for your business, but also for your family and your personal life. And, one of my favorite, and it's taken me years to really understand this. One of my favorite verses of the Bible that I'm not good at pulling out verses of the Bible, by the way, but one of my favorites that I do remember is, I believe it's Jeremiah 29:11. And it says, God, he's talking to Jeremiah, and he says, I have a plan for you, and the plan is good. He doesn't say Jeremiah has a plan. He says he has a plan for him. And when
Plans
you
to prosper you and not to harm you. Yep.
exactly, it's
Mhm.
it's probably my favorite verse, and I actually recite it to my kids in a certain way a lot. And so, but that's so true. Is if we just have that faith that everything's going to be okay, everything's going to happen for a reason, and on the other side of it, we'll deal with it as it comes. Because overthinkers, I tend to be one. You worry about the what ifs, right? What if
Right.
this happens? And I think there's strength in that, and it can also be a fault. And so it's like you've really, really learned that, and that's the life that you live, Pete. Good, really good job. It's a great story.
Well, I appreciate that. The one thing I did learn is there's always a bigger meaning, right? So you could be going through sickness or have a family problem or be facing your marriage falling apart,
Yeah,
and know that there's a bigger reason for it, and know that you don't have to walk that alone.
yeah,
And he's a good God, man. He'll never leave you.
right, right. Yeah, what a great story. So, so with your faith, and I've learned this too, is you how does it relate to your primary relationships? And I really like what you shared with me offline a couple of months ago about your primary relationship. Be authentic, be as vulnerable as you want. I'm not going to pressure you to share anything that you don't want to, but
Yeah.
it obviously you've gone through things that other people are either going through or have gone through or will go through. And I found that it's very, very helpful to just be authentic and transparent.
So about 14 years into this walk with Christianity, um, my marriage fell apart,
Wow.
and I went through a divorce. And what I found through that process was, you can talk the talk, but do you really walk the walk? Right. So what happens is there's a verse I believe in Luke about the parable of the seeds, right? And some seeds are on rocky soil, some are on soil that's not too deep, and then some really sprout and take root and are never shakable.
Yeah.
And what I found through that whole process was, if you completely trust and you completely allow yourself to be changed, and be renewed, then you can be that plant, that seed that um, is planted in deep soil and continues to develop fruit. And I wasn't that person in my marriage, so ended up learning the hard way and having God walk me through some things, um, and grow me.
Mhm.
I was blessed to be part of a great church at that time and had a great pastor who was very patient and very um, detail oriented and spent a lot of time with me. And what ended up happening was, 3 years after the divorce, my wife and I actually reconciled and were remarried. So that doesn't happen a lot. And here we are, 8 years after being remarried and going strong. It's not perfect. We still have to work at it every day, but I think if you asked her, and I know if you asked me, I couldn't picture myself with anybody else. I mean, it's definitely a God story. And the fact that we were able to walk through what we walked through and reconcile with each other, shows that there's hope, especially in this world nowadays, which we live in a drive-through society, right?
You're so right.
Um, yeah.
You're so
And
right.
if you don't have things catered to you the way you want, then you know what? Put it in drive and go somewhere else and get
Walk
what you
away.
want. Yep.
Yeah, and that's even our society, I think, even promotes that.
Yeah.
Like if you're not happy, just move on. And
Hmm.
obviously, what I want to be very clear to people about is, um, if there's a, I am such a proponent of marriage. Having recently divorced myself, I know what Pete has gone through. To a certain extent, anyway. I don't know exactly, of course, but if there's abuse in your marriage, if there's addictions, if there's continued adultery, those are things. I'm not saying to stay in that marriage. I'm just not, and I'm not a pastor. I'm not a preacher. These are my own personal experiences, and like Pete, through my process, I had an amazing pastor who I call a good friend now, and who can, I guess, navigate these things way better than me. But I do think that in general, marriage should be intentional. It shouldn't be work. I don't like to call it that, but it should be, you have to act intentionally. You have to do intentional things. And it's not this Hollywood fantasy. If you read First Corinthians, First Corinthians 13, like I'm sure you have, Pete, with your wife, it doesn't talk about a Hollywood romance. It says, love is patient, love is kind, all those kind of, it's things that we do. It's the verb, it's the actions and how we act. And if what's great about your story is what's so rare about it is obviously to reconcile like that is that it took two people to say, you know what, I wasn't perfect. And how can we develop this together and get better and grow together? Because that's what a marriage should be. You should be getting better and growing closer every day. Yeah. And so that's so rare. Usually there's one that's like, oh, no way. And so good for you. It's a great story. I'm glad you guys have reconciled. And I think God loves reconciliation. I know he does. He hates divorce, although sometimes it's necessary. And he loves reconciliation. Sometimes reconciliation means getting back together. Sometimes it means just fixing your own life and getting on with what you're willing to, because the other person might not be willing.
Yeah, so, I'll say one thing about that, Shane. I firmly believe that God cares a lot more about your relationship with him than he does about your relationship with your spouse. And if you will work on your relationship with him, everything else will work out, even if your marriage isn't destined for reconciliation. And I never, I fully believed at the beginning of my experience that, we were going to be reconciled. And about a year through it, I said, maybe this just isn't part of the cards. Wow. And, 2 years later, we were reconciled, but God had to move and we had to allow him to move to do that. And again, in the drive-through society, sometimes people don't want to give them the space to do that.
No, they don't.
I would not recommend doing it my way, by the way. to be completely destroyed and torn down is not a good way to do it.
It's not, but sometimes you have to reach rock bottom to know what you do actually have. And absolutely. A lot of people never reach that rock bottom. Sometimes they're alcoholics or they're drug addicts or whatever. They just spin out of control and they don't know what rock bottom looks like. And sometimes it's death. So it's your own journey, Pete, and obviously you've grown through it. And I think that's just amazing. And to listen to God's story and reconciliation, I think is a huge thing. Again, reconciliation doesn't always mean getting back together. It means maybe it's reconciling with God. And some people are in a marriage where it's probably very, very difficult to reconcile with God. And that's a whole nother conversation that you have to undo and unravel, that it go way, way beyond me. So
absolutely. You got to have two parties that are willing to walk that road. And absolutely, the majority of the time you don't have that. And so I understand mine was a unique situation. And look, if we can minister to people based on what we went through, then I'm happy to do that.
Yeah. Well, it's a great story. Really, really good job. So
thank you.
So we move on to another topic because I found this out about you too. You're into weightlifting as well. Is that correct?
I am. I'm nowhere near as buff as you are, Shane. I would say I'm more than a dabbler. So I'm in the gym 4 or 5 times a week. That's mostly because, if I don't, my head's going to explode. Right?
Absolutely.
So I need an outlet. And for some people, outlet is running. For some, it's, aerobic exercise. For me, it's throwing weight around. I love it.
Mine too. Yeah.
It's a great outlet for me. I've made some great friends through my time at the gym that I go to. And I just look forward to it. I love it.
That's great. And so how long have you been doing that?
About 7 or 8 years.
Okay.
I used to lift weights a lot when I was younger. Okay. Got out of it, got back into it, and now it's just I'm in my 50s now. I'm not into competing. I'm not going to be the guy that basically gets in a bench press contest. Right. I mean, I'm trying to stay alive.
Well, you're trying to thrive. Actually, and you can do it even in your 50s, and that's great. I mean, because a lot of people aren't willing to do that, and I agree. I mean, but like I actually take breaks. I force myself to take breaks, like a week off or whatever. Oh man, that is so hard to do. I mean, it's
It is.
necessary for recovery and training and gains and all these kind of things. But I'm the same way with you. If I don't get in there 4 or 5 times a week, it's going to be hard for me to be in a good mood, and people probably don't want to be around me much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And I have to work out before I go home. I've got to get it out of me. I've got to get the stress of the day out of me. Spend, 45 minutes in the gym and then leave, and I'm happy.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, good for you. Keep training. I think that's awesome. And so another topic that I learned from you, and it's a great organization, by the way. I'm going to give shameless plugs here, but the organization is called Vistage, Vistage, and it's Pete can describe it way more than me. I'm kind of a newbie in it at this point, but it's a leadership organization connecting people all around the world. Is it you for sure? The United States, is it all around? Is it globally as well, Pete?
I'm pretty sure it's global.
Okay. So
So
describe Vistage.
so Vistage is a CEO peer group.
Yeah.
So when you run a business, um, man, there are times when you would really love somebody to talk to, someone who has gone through the things that you're going through now, such as COVID, right? So I was introduced to this group about 2 years ago. And the way it works is they have a coach or a chair, he's called, who's usually a guy who's been an entrepreneur, owned multiple businesses or a business. And he has a group of 10 to 15 CEOs, presidents, managing directors, whatever the title is, who get together once a month and spend a day together and just talk and process issues and getting guest speakers. And it's fantastic. It's just great because it gives you the ability to tap into the minds of other business leaders. It's a great value. It's something I thoroughly enjoy. I really love the issues processing part of it because it allows you to see that what you're doing or what you're going through that you don't have an answer for, people have already been there and done that.
Yeah.
And can tell you how to make it work and what not to do.
Right.
And it's priceless. It's priceless. It's like having a life coach, 15 different life coaches in a room of guys who are multi-millionaires. The first time I was in a room with these guys, I thought, man, am I out of my league? That guy over there he sold his company for $250 million, and
Yeah.
I'm living paycheck to paycheck, and what am I doing here? And then, a couple months later, he's asking me for advice about something.
Yeah.
And that's the great thing about Vistage is you always get to participate.
I think that's awesome. Yeah, I've experienced the issue solving. I don't know what to call it. I'm not. I'm a kind of a newbie and just dipping my toes in the water at this point. But it is really good to be surrounded by those types of people that have gone through it before. And I'm connected through the Boise office now, and it's a really, really cool thing that I've seen so far. And there's not many places where you can go where you can talk about those issues in confidence. And it's like, they might not have gone through the exact same thing, but they've gone through enough things to know what the direction to steer you. And you just don't get a lot of advice like that. You just don't,
No.
So
I mean, you can talk to guys at the gym, about stuff, but most of them, may not run their own businesses or know how to process, hey, how do I lay somebody off, or how do I hire this person, or who should I hire, or
right.
How do I keep the doors open in my business, or how do I obtain financing? It's a unique outlet. I would highly recommend it if you're a business owner or you run a business, or if you're a number two guy in a business like I was for years. It's a fantastic outlet. Vistage.com.
Yeah, it is. Definitely check it out. Check it out. And so my last two questions, we're wrapping this up, Pete, and I always ask these questions. And one of them is, and we've already heard some of your trials and your rewards and overcoming. And so name a time in your life that you thought was a failure, but good things became of it. And so what I like to say is I've come to understand that life really doesn't have failures. Life has learning experiences, but somebody looking upon our lives might say, "Oh, that was a failure," or we might even internalize things like a perfectionist kind of sometimes does. "Oh, that was a failure." But can you name a time in your life that others or yourself thought was a failure, but really good things became of it, and what became of it?
Yeah, I could name 100 of them.
Start wherever.
Yeah, I would say, the first thing that comes to mind is the divorce.
Wow.
Um, the ones who really hurt in the divorce are kids. And I felt like when my marriage fell apart that I was really betraying my kids, that my kids were going to be scarred for life. And they were hurt.
Yeah.
Um, but we've become a phoenix in that, right? We've risen from the ashes and my family's together again. And that's a good thing.
That's
Um, Another thing that was a failure on the front was being unable to keep all my employees through the beginning of COVID. There's nothing worse than having to let people go, especially in a situation where they're going to have a problem finding a job.
right.
It's gut wrenching, and people don't really understand when you're an owner of a business. It kept me up at night.
Yeah.
And at that point, I didn't even own the business. I just ran the business. But to me, these people were family,
Right.
and it. Hopefully, they're all okay. Some of them I've kept in touch with, and I think they've all found alternate employment. And I know that we're okay. So I knew that at the time it was going to be hard, but looking back, it was really the only thing we could have done.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It made your company stronger so you could actually grow and I don't know what good would you, I don't want to put words in your mouth. That's a hard one to find good in, but everything happens for a reason.
All right.
What good could you find in that?
Well, the good was we could make payroll.
Right.
And it made us leaner and really made us think about how we were going to restaff when the time came.
Yeah.
We lost some good people, um, but we hired some very good people later on to replace those people,
Yeah.
and it allowed us to go in some different directions. I would love to have all those people back,
Sure.
but it's not possible at this point.
Right.
So, a good thing is you learn from it. You also learn how to try to build to avoid it again in the future.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. You learn. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. You put in safeguards to hopefully that won't happen again somehow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Diversification, whatever it is. Well, those are great stories. Both those are great stories with good endings. And so the theme of this show is never be outworked. And so tell me about a time in your life when you wanted to give up, but you persevered and you just kept going. You didn't want to. Can you name one specific instance where you would have that mindset of never being outworked?
Yeah, I would say it was during the dark days of COVID when we knew we had a strong product and that if we could come up with a way to be a game changer, that we could make an impact. And it wasn't me. It was the people who work here who basically refused to give up. And we worked our butts off. And like I had people in the lab on Easter weekend last year,
Wow.
running gels, running tests, around the clock, trying to find ways to make things work. Those are people. That's family right there. Those are people that you go to war for those people because they believe in you, they believe in themselves, they believe in the company, and they do everything they can to try to make things work. And so, um, I think that's probably the thing I'm most proud of is the fact that we, even if it was by accident, that we became a game changer in a pandemic.
Congratulations. It isn't, it
This
isn't
little
great.
company in Kennesaw, Georgia, that nobody really had ever heard of outside of homogenizers, now has a place on the world stage.
That is
Through
incredible. That is incredible. And
Yeah.
it's why small businesses, and now you're part of a large business, and that's perfect. But there's so much innovation and ability to innovate and ability to move quickly and be dynamic that's why so many small businesses are really the engine of the economy.
Absolutely.
They just are. And
Mhm.
it's because you have that family type atmosphere where people get stuff done. Same in my organization. It's like it's the same thing. And so kudos to you to be a great leader. I know you've been there through thick and thin, and it's been a really, it's a cool story. It's really an American success story. It really, really is. And really, really good job, Pete.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I give all the credit to the people who are here. I just was very fortunate to have good people.
Well, you're a great leader, and you've certainly developed them and probably hired them as well. And as kudos, it does take a team for sure. So as we wrap things up here, I want to again tell you to join me on LinkedIn, join me on Facebook, join me on Instagram. You can find this podcast will be edited in about a week or so and be online and available in full version edited on SoundCloud, on YouTube, on iTunes, and also on Spotify, all the places where you can find those things. Just search Secrets of Success podcast with Dr. Shane Needham, and you'll find me, or you'll see at the banner streaming at the bottom of this show, you'll see that you can also find all that information on my website and more information about me as well, drsneedham.com. Thank you, fans. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, viewers, and to our sponsors. Thank you as well. We continue to get more and more sponsors. Thank you very much. I'm interested, and if you're interested in sponsoring this show, just reach out to me on any of the media and just contact me, and we'd be glad to connect with you and discuss any type of arrangement that you would like to discuss. And Pete, thanks again very, very much. It's been a great show. And let's definitely keep in touch. So glad to know you. I'm glad that our network is big in the globe, but it's actually very small in people. And so thanks again, Pete, for joining us.
All right, God bless you, Sean. Shane, you're a fantastic guy. I'm happy to know you and happy that you're a success. And I wish you all the best.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Pete. We'll be in touch.
All right, buddy.
Take care.